Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler, and boy, have some war tensions been rising around the world. One I completely predicted, the other one I kind of predicted. I will get into it. First one, completely predictable. Israel. Now, I didn't exactly predict that they would attack Qatar on the eve, again, leading up to negotiations where they used the United States as a negotiations broker to entrap their self declared enemies so that they can then whack them. Didn't predict that. Did predict that Bibi Netanyahu would continue to go off the absolute rails and ride a crazy train and, ramp up war efforts, which he's done. He is going to piss off the entire Middle East at this rate and then have to deal with the fact that nobody wants to help Israel out. That's if he can survive, which is the almost assuredly legal challenges against him, his continued rule, and possibly have a collapse of government like we are seeing in Europe with first the French. I think Keir Starmer's also on the way out. Definitely the Germans, especially after 6 AFD candidates are schwacked just before local elections that were supposed to happen in Germany. Yeah. I think the German government's going to have some serious problems. We know the UK government's going to have problems. The Irish government's having problems. Scottish government, I believe, is also having some issues as well. Canada's going to have issues, but less because our opposition doesn't want to actually oppose because they're not in the position to actually oppose because they still have no idea what went wrong in the federal election. So there's that. Anyways, Israeli, or specifically Bibi, attacking into a sovereign nation's capital that you are not at war at and is hosting the negotiations that are going forward for the hostages and a ceasefire and all that. Not a good look, especially when you do what you did with Iran, which is at the very last minute you inform the Americans so that they can't stop you, and then have the president of the United States run cover, which is now torching his domestic agenda because he's spending political capital that he has a finite amount of on Israel instead of, hey, we have to do something about the crime. We have to do something about all the illegal immigrants. We have to pass this style of law. We have to deal with the Senate. Like, Trump is just torching himself at this point, and it looks like Trump 2.0 will just be Trump 1.1, which is not a very great thing. But it's completely predictable. Like, Bibi's going to most likely spiral out of control unless the Israeli people and the other political apparatus and institutional apparatus in the country can nudge him out of position before you get close to a death spiral. You're not there yet, but you're very much on that way. Now, the reason I had to do this video, and now I'm re-recording it, is because of the Russians, what is supposedly going on with the Poles. It looks like since the change in government with Poland, there's been a change in attitude with Russia. Now, they were always going to try and pick a fight, but it seems like they really, really want to get a fight, because now with the supposed drone incursion that apparently happened, and with Poles attacking, I've heard they've shot down between 3 and 5, maybe as high as 6. But the why I have to record this is because the Kremlin has come out and said, whoa, 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 whoa. We didn't send that shit out there. We want proof that our stuff went into your nation. None of this, hey, you can just make claims. Show us the proof, because we didn't do this. It looks like another false flag that is being attempted due to the ongoing troubles of the Ukrainians to win their desperate fight against the Russians, the evil, evil Russians, because Russia must be the bad guy. Originally, I thought this was, because I had not read that part of the news, I had not seen the Kremlin's response. I thought it was the Russians reminding the Poles of, hey, you are an active participant in this war. Back the ever-living hell off, because they most likely got some piece of intelligence of the Poles doing something more, or NATO doing something more. And it was just a not-so-friendly incursion with no active, military goals, just to scoot in, scoot out, and just remind the Poles, hey, you're actively involved. We can attack you. That type of deal. Because if you don't know, Poland is like the second most involved country in the Ukraine war, first being the United States. The Poles are actively doing what you should really consider arms smuggling, where they are using civilian vehicles to transport military aid. When I say military aid, think of munitions and such, from Poland to the Ukrainians. NATO High Command is running their operations out of Poland, relaying that to Ukrainian High Command, who is coincidentally also operating out of Poland. The Ukrainians are training their forces, or what's left of them, in Poland before they get sent to the front lines. Oh God, what else? Like when I say like the NATO command structure is there, it's like the Americans are doing their spy plane activities over Ukraine and Russia. They relay to the NATO forces pass it along to the Ukrainians, and so on and so forth, like actively involved in this war. So the Russians are claiming this is a false flag. It's still relatively early on to definitively say it, but if I'm going to pick someone whose reports are, let's say, more on the up and up, it's probably the Russians, because it kind of like my scenario of like, oh hey, the Russians are there making sure the Poles don't, it kind of makes sense. Like if that was their objective, okay, it's not the smartest way to do it, but like other than that, there was no real sense. But now you want to say, hey, the drones were coming in from, what is it, Belarus, and the Poles are like, hey, let's just false flag this shit. Let's make some noises, and we can have our go at the Russians, because we're chomping at the bit for it. We can drag in the rest of Europe. We can bring in the Americans, and it's like, there's people out there saying, like it kind of makes more sense that that the Russians actually didn't really do it, or maybe it was an accident. Who knows? Again, it's relatively early. It'll take a while to get the definitive picture. But when you look at what immediately happened, is like you had massive amounts of calls for Article 5 to be immediately enacted. with the Russians' response, it's like, okay, all right, this looks like another false flag attempt along the lines of what happened when the Ukrainians fired, what was it, S-300s into Poland, and I think they killed a cow, but I think they also killed like 2 Poles. And then the Ukrainians were out there saying, "Ah, look, the Russians, they attacked Poland." And then, you had that whole wave of Article 5. It seems really similar to that. And seeing as these script writers just recycle ideas now and just kind of just throw shit at the wall to see what sticks, it makes more sense. Do I implicitly believe the Russians? Absolutely not. I don't trust anybody. I think the Russian numbers, like when you look at casualty rates, I think the Russian numbers are cooked. I think the Ukrainians are cooked. I think the Russian numbers are likely only 10 to 15% off of reality because of the way they've structured the war, and they're fighting it their way in a very slow, methodical way that, focuses on drawing the Ukrainian forces into hard points and then attacking and cutting off their supply lines, so then they have to pull back, and you're not attacking fortified positions as often. So makes a whole lot of sense, keeps your death toll. And then, you have the whole, every time there's a prisoner exchange or body exchange, the Russians show up, they've got shit, or they've got either alive people or dead people, and the Ukrainians never show. Because they kind of don't have the dead people or the live people, just swap. So, but the Russians keep doing it. Like, I have been saying this forever. The Russians are basically the only adults in the room at the moment when it comes to the war in Ukraine. They're the only ones thinking about the potential of what happens with escalation. Like, you can very much see them doing very, like, they escalate, but it's limited to actual military targets for the most part. They do civilian infrastructure, when they were specifically targeting the electrical grid, the gas grid, that's no bueno, but can't really criticize because the world will let the Americans do the same thing in Iraq to a much larger degree, where they actually also went after water infrastructure as well, because that was dual purpose. So it's a little bit different. It's very similar, but different. So, like, NATO keeps trying to cross Russia's red lines. And the Ukrainians do it too. I bring this up every time because the Ukrainians used a humanitarian corridor in the Black Sea that was meant for shipping grain that would go to Africa. That's where it was supposed to go, but the Europeans were, in a bit of a cost of living crisis, so they were snagging it. Launched an attack from the humanitarian corridor on, I think they did it twice. It was on the Kerch Bridge and on a Russian, some part of the Russian naval fleet that's in the Black Sea at the moment. So, yeah. I'm not likely to buy NATO's stories, especially when NATO was out there pushing the ghost of Kiev. And the original video of that was from, like, Arma 3. Oh my god, remember that island in the small island in the Black Sea? That narrative where, like, the small Ukrainians fought to the last man, telling the Russians to go fuck themselves. when in reality, the Russians said, hey, surrender. We've got you surrounded by our little boat fleet. And the Ukrainians were like, go fuck yourself. Then they fired like a warning salvo into the island, and the Ukrainians were like, okay, we give up. We're done. Like, just. Yeah. Or all the other lies that you can think of. So I'm inclined to lean towards this is a false flag in an attempt to really try and bring the Americans into the war. They're using Poland because Trump likes Poland. Trump likes the Polish people. Trump likes the Polish president. So it's very much along the lines of why did NATO or the coalition of the willing show up to Washington D.C. with Zelensky and then use Giorgia Meloni, the somewhat pretty president, it's prime minister of Italy that Trump loves. Trump loves the chick for some reason. Don't know why. They use her to bring up the topic of, hey, you know what? Ukraine needs some security guarantees. We should have some NATO security guarantees, which would be a trip line for Article fucking 5 in World War III. Like, these people seem to know how to push want to push Trump into war. Like, the Israelis know how to do it. Why would we assume that the Europeans don't? But there seems to be some differences. Yeah. So I suspect this again. This is an escalation. Is this going to get Article 5? Probably not. I would make the assumption, all right, that again, as the Ukrainians, it becomes more and more apparent to the Ukrainians, to the Europeans, and then to the American allies that Ukraine is going to lose no matter what. You'll see more of this dumb stunts, but I would make the presumption that nobody actually A, believes it, and B, will go Article 5 because Europe is in no position to deal with that. Like, no position. I bring this up quite often when I talk about this lately. Like, Germany's defense spending increase, all right? That's just a bailout. That's a stimulus package, all right? You have such massive problems in Germany's industrial sector, they are attempting to save it. And it's due to, hey, we had Nord Stream 1 and 2. Nord Stream 2 was about to go online, or was on partial functionality. And we blew them up, and then the gas was rerouted. Has now been rerouted to China because they are building that pipeline out. And Turk Stream and all the others. There's more than one Turk Stream happening. So, yeah, Germany's in a desperate place. And that's basically Europe's industrial sector that they have left. If you don't have an industrial sector, you don't have a war machine. You don't have a war machine, it's very difficult to go to war. Like, Alexander Mercouris over on the Durand also has a habit of bringing up, when talking about British Armed Forces, the fact that, like, they might be able to put together a tank battalion. Maybe two. They are that short on tanks. Tanks are kind of important in war nowadays. And before you even think of like logistics of, hey, tanks and armor and all that old stuff, it has been shown in the most recent wars that have been being waged at a high technological level. So think about the short war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, uh, both times, I believe, in the last couple of years. Drone warfare is extremely important, and NATO's basically working with Predator drones with Hellfire missiles, which are just, robot aircraft, instead of what the Russians are using, and the Ukrainians to a lesser extent, which is more sophisticated drone warfare, where the drone could be used as a weapons platform like a Predator drone, but is most likely used as a suicide missile because it's way cheaper and way more effective to have a hunter-killer robot that flies that you can pilot right to the bad guy. That's quite difficult to deal with as of right now. So they also don't have that infrastructure. The infrastructure for drones goes all the way back to China. So the risk of World War III is there. I'm not going to undersell it. I'm not going to oversell it. I just think it's highly unlikely. I think the most likely scenario, instead of, the push towards World War III, is something more akin to what happened in George Orwell's 1984, where you have, a few coalition forces or different coalition forces. So think Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Europe, possibly the United States, and then say South America and Africa. And, you have perpetual proxy wars going on in, say, South Africa, or not South Africa, well, Southern Africa, but all of Africa, South America, which is what I was trying to say, and then set up Africa. The brain wasn't working. And then, say, parts of Southeastern Asia as well, where you have basically what's going on in Ukraine, where you have one side supporting the country, a country's national forces, and then one of the other coalitions that is out there, they're, invading of some variety, or helping a, the freedom fighter faction, and then other factions get involved by sending in mercenaries, or they're vacationing, or retired troops show up there, and you get these endless proxy wars going on. If there was going to be a state of World War III, that's the scenario I would lean towards. But due to global macroeconomic factors, I'm disinclined to believe that. I think it goes more Cold War, where you have limited proxy efforts, like we're gonna say, like Vietnam is the outlier in what happened in the Cold War. Think about all the other stuff of like, oh yeah, we'll send some dudes into Rhodesia with some weapons and shit, or what goes on now where you just have like the Green Berets being deployed all over the world, and they're training and they're helping supply stuff like that, smaller stuff, because again, the economy is going down the drain. Now, that could lead to massive war, but when you look at basically everybody besides Russia, their economic footing is so weak, they'll likely have implosions of the government, and I am including China in that. Like, I do not think Xi survives, like, let alone as president. I don't think he survives. Like, whatever, you think of Xi and his policies and whatever, he has had a stranglehold of control over China. I think that disappears, and he goes the way of Hu Jintao, which, has anybody seen that guy in a year plus? I think he's just gone. He was a semi-public figure, there and then not there, and then there and then not there. They dragged him out because he's the former president of China. Important guy for party continuation, and now everybody just assumes he's whacked. I assume that's what happened with Xi, because he's got massive problems. Like every couple of months, Xi is doing massive political purges, right? Where oh hey, this general just disappears or gets locked up in a anti-corruption crackdown, and he's gone. Nobody's heard from him. Or like that she was a tennis player, right? The Chinese tennis player that spoke out about the Chinese COVID lockdowns or whatever. And then the Chinese brought her out once for a public appearance in which you could see, oh, she's a hostage. And then we haven't heard from her since. You could see that with Xi. China's domestic economy is so effed. It is so, economies that we are seeing today, typically, if they last long enough, absolutely cause the fall of governments. Go read the French about the French Revolution, and when every time something like a pseudo government that was just formed fell, it was because of the economy, or almost every single time. And from the monarchy fell because of the economy. So, again, rising war tensions around the world because nobody has given themselves a way out. So expect that to happen. To continue, I don't think it's going to escalate to World War III. And when I say World War III, I mean the conventional sense of World War III. We may already be in World War III, or 4 or 5, however you want to describe that. I think when people say World War III, I'm thinking of a conventional war setting along the lines of, say, World War II or 1, where it's we are formally at war, we have made the declarations, and our troops are actively engaging each other on the battlefield, wearing patches and flying flags. Not, clandestine operations or proxy wars. Or, what the intel agencies do. I classify that as something different. All right, that's the video for today. I hope you liked it. Tomorrow, I am going to talk about what's going on with Carney and the pipeline that he continually says he wants, but has recently leaked that, hey, no oil company is biting. This is something I also saw. I didn't specifically see with Carney in this, but I did talk about it in one video where, if you're going to go back on the current state of Canada, you're going to need to invest heavily for about 10 years to get the confidence of companies to show up so they then can take over. I did say that would happen. That's how you'd have to roll. But anyways, that's the Friday video for this week. Until then, have a good day, and I will see you tomorrow.